So Cullen's social support theory is the final integrated theory. It is actually one of my favorite criminological theories. Cullen argues in his theory, Social Support and Crime, that social support affects crime across individuals, communities, and nations. He explains, and if you think about it, all the theories that we've covered this semester, that close to 90% or so of theories identify social support as the cause of crime. He describes as social support, he actually borrows from another theorist named Lynn, and he describes how social support has 4 dimensions. Social support can be perceived or actual, meaning it can be perceived, so it could be interpreted or anticipated to happen. Or it can be actual, meaning you are physically receiving in a mechanical way support. So you think about this, receiving support would be your parent hugging you, or anticipating the support would be, you know, that if you ever needed your parent, they would be there to support you. Social support can be instrumental, which means it could be a means to a goal. So here you can think about social capital and how we're all connected to each other. And so one relationship could lead you to a job, right? This would be instrumental support. Or it could be expressive, meaning a relationship is both an ends and a means. So it could be that relationship you can share and you can vent and you can love and you can gain affection and companionship. He says that social support can occur on different social levels. It could be on the micro level where it's just your spouse. It could be on the meso level where you're getting support from your community. Or it could be on a much larger macro level where you're feeling some maybe perhaps governmental support or support from your state. I think about this a lot in relation to gay marriage and how you can imagine the lack of support some people in Georgia, for example, have been experiencing around gay marriage. Then support could be formal, such as support from your school or government assistance, or it could be informal, such as, informal social control, like social relationships with your friends or social capital that you have with your community. So again, he describes that most criminological theories identify lack of support as the cause of crime. Even though these theories don't specifically use the term social support, they have their own term, they nonetheless are talking about this major underlying concept of social support. So here I've identified 15 of the theories that we covered in class this semester that, while they don't identify the term social support, underlying causal factor of crime is the lack of support. So we'll do a quick review. This is actually very helpful as well for your final exam. The first theory is Braithwaite. This is reintegrative shaming. If you remember, in communitarian societies, they are much more likely to shame the offender and then reintegrate, providing support for the offender to help them integrate to society. And this actually reduces recidivism. Sherman is defiance theory. He describes how the presence of bonds and a positive experience through the system, so some form of procedural justice, actually reduces defiance. So it reduces reoffending. Sampson, Rodenbush, and Earls talk about collective efficacy and the value of having a mutual trust in that community with a willingness to intervene on behalf of that community. That's communal support. Shaw and McKay make the same argument in social disorganization theory about the value of social ties and social capital, and how having those ties and having that capital can actually mitigate the relationship between poverty, mobility, heterogeneity, and crime. Mesner and Rosenfeld identify the lack of support as a result of our individualistic society and our fetishism for money, and how we value the economy more than we value families and schools and the government, which makes it much harder for them to provide the support needed to its people. Curry, in his Market Societies piece, identifies how we don't provide safety nets for individuals, and that this is harmful. We provide very little support for families, and how this makes crime more likely. And then the next three theories, well, four theories, I should say, the next four theories all talk about social bonds in some form or social control. So the next four theories talk about social control. Reckless was outer and inner containment, and the value of support in producing both outer and inner containments, preventing criminal offending. Hershey talked about social bonds, attachments, commitments, involvements, and beliefs, and how those inhibit offending. So having that support through your attachments, your commitments, your involvements. Garvison and Hershey describe effective parenting, and one of the ways in which you effectively parent is monitoring your child. And so providing that support to your child increases the likelihood that your child will have high levels of self-control. Sampson and Laub talk about social support throughout the life course, but they talk about in relation to social bonds and how your social bonds will change throughout your life course. And when you're highly bonded and those bonds are salient and reciprocal, you're much more likely to refrain from criminal offending. Cohen and Felsen describe the value of the capable guardian and how that capable guardian is some form of support, someone who could intervene and prevent crime from happening. Akers talks about the wrong social support, having social support from your delinquent peers versus having social support from your conventional peers. Messerschmitt talks about the lack of support that we provide for boys and how this harms boys and pushes them into criminal offending. So we want boys to be aggressive. We don't want boys to be verbal and compassionate. We don't teach them those traits. Merton is a strain theorist, talked about anomie and normlessness, and how there's a lack of support in our social institutions and an overemphasis on pecuniary success. And so he argues that we need to provide more support so people can attain pecuniary success without engaging in other modes of adaptation. Todd Clear, he wrote Imprisoning Communities, and he talked about how there's a lack of support in those communities, particularly for those offenders who return from prison. I'm sure you can come up with many others. Your final exam will ask you about the theories that identify social support as a causal factor in crime. So in your text, Cullen describes the 10 propositions from those theories as well as other theories to show how there's a lack of support that causes crime. So if you look back at those propositions, particularly as you study for the final, it might be helpful to link the theory to the proposition. So which theory talks about how the United States has higher levels of crime than other places because of our lack of support? Right? Braithwaite talks about it. Merton talks about it. Mez and Roosevelt talk about it. Curry talk about it. If you have any questions as you're doing that, please Q&A. So Cullen identifies 4 policy implications based on his theory of social support. First, he says that we must have a more supportive society. And we do this by providing governmental support to families, to communities, etc. But we can do this much more easily on a micro level. If you remember from Quinny and the mugger the young man who treated his mugger nicely, right? That is one way in which we can end suffering. We want to change the values from individualism, so stop focusing so much on ourselves and instead focus on the community or the impact that our behavior has on others. And remember that we are all interdependent. Providing community and family supports. This can be done through having better parental leave programs, better daycare programs, food stamp programs, housing programs, even providing sick leave, and just parenting programs. And finally, he argues for the end of punitive programs. And if you remember, Todd Clear talked a lot about this, especially if you remember looking at the photos between prisons in the US and around the world. Okay, so what type of integration is this? Well, this is concept integration, because they're all talking about the same underlying concept of social support. So that is the end of integrated theories. If you have any questions about them, you can always use the Q&A.